this is a $2,600 compressor, but what you were actually hearing was a $350 clone. The 1176 is one of the most iconic compressors of all time. There have been dozens of clones that keep coming, both in the hardware world and in plugins. It's one of my favorite vocal compressors when I'm mixing, and I also use it all the time on bass guitar and drums, especially room mics. Now here's the same song again, this time with a real UA 1176.
I dream of rainbow skies, the ultraviolet eyes that burn right through me.
I want to find out how close the lower priced clones come to the flagship 1176 from Universal Audio. So I got the real thing, plus 3 clones ranging in price from $350 to $1,850. And to keep things fair, we're only comparing newly made units here, not testing something made today against a vintage unit made 60 years ago. All right, it's time to get started. This one feels significantly lighter. It is the cheapest version, the Clark Technic KT76. There it is. Purple MC77. So this is the 1176 LN from Universal Audio. In terms of build quality, the UA and Purple units are heavy and solid, almost identical in feel and weight, whereas the Warm Audio and Clark Technic are both smaller, lighter, and no doubt they just have a cheaper feel to them. It's not really a surprise though, given that you're saving 75 and 85% of the cost. And hey, if you gotta save money somewhere, hopefully it's on the outside and not the inside. On the back, the UA looks very much like a vintage 1176 with the wire connectors and all. And everything else is pretty standard, except the Purple adds a sidechain option. All right, I had to dig out a whole bunch of old cables and wire this up through my old patch bay, which I haven't used in years, but I've got it all set up going through my carbon interface, and it's not pretty, but we're ready to test. So let's get a baseline first using the actual UA version, the most expensive version here. And on their website, they claim, of course, that this is true to the original. So they're saying it's hand-built, a faithful reproduction of the original design. And if we scroll further down here, one of the most critical aspects of recreating the sound was faithfully reproducing the original output transformer. And they found extensive design notes that enabled him to recreate and improve his father's original design. So pretty cool. So let's check out how it sounds. So I've duplicated the vocal track here, and in place of the plugin 1176,
There's something on my mind, a burning paradise.
Let's get rid of that, and let's go to the UA hardware.
There's something on my mind, a burning paradise before the steps of heaven's door. I dream of rainbow skies, the ultraviolet eyes that burn right through me when you're...
All right, so let's compare that to the original vocal mix that I had, which again is just with the Waves plugin.
There's something on my mind, a burning paradise before the steps of heaven's door.
All right, so I think we need a little more compression of the hardware here.
There's something on my mind, a burning paradise before the steps of heaven's door. I dream of rainbow skies, the ultraviolet eyes that burn right through me when you're...
All right, so that's the most expensive 1176 here. So let's see what happens if we switch to the cheapest one.
There's something on my mind, a burning paradise before the steps of heaven's door. There's something on my mind, a burning paradise before the steps of heaven's door.
Okay, that Clark Technic actually sounds like almost identical to the plugin. I'm kind of surprised by that. Let's see what happens when we double the price of the clone, which is gonna be the Warm Audio.
I never wanted more to say, I know we can win this fight. Heavenly call is calling for tonight.
Okay, that one sounds different. Definitely sounds like it's just more distorted, more saturated. Okay, let's double that price again, which is the Purple MC77.
I never wanted more to say I know we can win this fight. Heavenly chorus calling for.
Yeah, so that sounds cleaner than the warm audio. Let's compare it to the plugin again.
I never wanted more to say I know we can win this fight. Heavenly chorus calling for tonight.
All right, I'm gonna print this vocal down through each of these compressors, and then we're gonna come back to this. Let's hear how these sound on some transient material. So let's check out the drums. Here's my original drum mix. And I'm slamming it on a Waves 1176. Let's start again with the UA version. Okay, interesting. These sound fairly different. Let's see if we find the same thing on the purple. Yeah, okay, either of these hardware units release a lot faster than the plugin is capable of. Then again, this is probably modeled after a different unit, a vintage unit, so, you know, maybe apples to oranges a little bit here. So every one of these hardware pieces responding very similarly. I kind of like how the faster release gives me a little bit more tone of the drum. Let's see if we can get something similar on the other guys. All right, I'm gonna print these down and then move on to bass. I'm liking this. These all sound pretty great. Print it. All right, I'm gonna listen to each one of these in solo now and switch back and forth and see if I can pick out any differences between these units. So let's use the same 3 hits. I will say the thing that's most surprising to me is that the cheapest version, the $350 KT76, it doesn't sound noticeably worse than the others. And once we get effects in, I mean, let's talk about the context of the mix. I mean, in that example, switching from a $350 unit to a $2,600 unit, it's hard to hear a difference. All right, what about the bass? Let's check that out. Again, I'm switching back and forth between these. I don't hear anything changing. Maybe the warm audio unit is a little more distorted. Let's bypass the other plugins just to hear it completely isolated. Yeah, so just like when I heard a little bit more saturation or distortion on the vocals, I think I hear that on the bass a little bit too with the warm audio version. And let's revisit the vocals again.
There's something on my mind, a burning paradise. I dream of rainbow skies, the ultraviolet eyes that burn right through me when you're...
Yeah, so the warm audio version does sound a little more saturated to me, but the other three, they sound interchangeable. Okay, so those are the main ways I would use this compressor in a real mix. But I want to have some fun slamming these and pushing them hard to see if any other differences come up, especially the famous all buttons in mode, which was surprisingly hard to get right. I can't get it. Ooh.
The sound of violent waves that drown our holy days and flood into the years to come.
To me, the saturation of the cheaper units didn't sound quite as pleasing when pushed hard, but you'd almost never be using them like this, and still, they're all pretty close. Once again, I think the Warm seemed the most different in character, and I think the UA version maybe sounded the cleanest. So not much difference when we're listening in solo. I don't think choosing one of these compressors or plugin over the other is gonna make or break your mix or make it any easier or harder to get the sound that you want. But I'm wondering, do the differences start to become more apparent if we stack these up in a mix? So I'm gonna do one final test, and what you're gonna hear is different versions of the mix with the different versions of the compressors on the snare and the bass and the lead vocals. So all pretty prominent parts of the mix. Let's see if we put them all together, if we hear any difference. So I've got them laid out on the screen here. I'm gonna cycle through them as we listen to the song.
There's something on my mind. I'm burning paradise before the steps of heaven's door. I dream of rainbow skies, the ultraviolet eyes that burn right through me. We go.
I mean, there's hardly any difference at all. Let's hear the chorus. Okay, one more section. I think it's absolutely crazy. To be honest, I was expecting to hear way more difference between these, especially between the UA 1176 and the Clark Technic there, especially you can feel the difference in the build quality, but sonically, I mean, wow, I mean, listen to this. Now here's the kicker, one more test. Let's hear my version with the plugins mixed in with the others.
There's something on my mind. I'm burning paradise before the steps of heaven's door. I dream of rainbow skies, the ultraviolet eyes that burn right through me. We go.
So this is interesting. I actually do hear a difference between the plugins and the hardware, mostly in the low end and the snare. I think I could definitely get a very different snare sound out of these hardware units compared to the plugins. The release time was a lot different, and it just sounds more 3D. It pops more. It's actually a little bit choked sounding on the plugin compared to the hardware. I did really enjoy dialing these compressors in on the bass. It seemed a little easier to control those low frequencies than it feels with the plugin. Well, there you go. I'm a little surprised. I actually wish there was more of a difference between these units just because it would be a little more interesting. I was even pretty biased coming into this against the cheaper version. I assumed that it would sound significantly worse, or at least be a lot different or harder to use and to dial in. But the more of these tests I do, whether it's tape versus digital or analog versus plug-in or expensive gear versus cheap gear, look, I've never been much of a gear snob to begin with, but I'm even finding that it matters less than I thought. So I guess I like them all. I'd be happy to use any of these compressors in a tracking or mixing situation. And I also still feel fine about my plugins too, except that 1176 plugin on the snare. I think I've got to try something else there because I liked what I got out of all of these a lot better. So hey, maybe you can let me know some suggestions in the comments below, and also let me know your opinion on this test and what differences you heard, which of these you preferred, if any. And if you want to watch another fun studio experiment like this one, check out this video here.